Hey y'all, this is maybe the only trans black nerd you know. I just want to say if you haven't seen the first part, probably check it out now. And I just want to let you guys know one quick little tidbit about this world. The world of Dragon Ball is so gigantically different than our own that I couldn't have Goku and his family land at any particular place and have the story go even remotely the same. So there's an additional continent on Earth now, a continent named after the god of, Dragon Ball, Kami. This was an idea I actually got from a really cool fanfic that is unfortunately discontinued at this point. It was called Dragon Ball DC. If you find it on fanfiction.net, be sure to give it a look. It's a different Dragon Ball DC to the one that's on YouTube, which is also great. But with that said, kick back, relax, and enjoy the show. Earth OCU Dragon Ball Part 2, A Family of Nomads. The vacuum of space flowed openly, nothing to stop meteors in its path from passing. The great space where two of the world's strongest in the universe had been, had died without screams, their empires already fading into memory, replaced by the cold steel of Lord Frieza. Excellent work keeping the Kryptonians contained while I arrived to deal with the monkeys. I must say you have a great gift for strategic violence. You shall have that troop I promised you. You'll be personally in charge of the little prince and his escort. Do with them as you please. Continue forwards, and there might be a new planet in your future. Thank you, Lord Frieza. The Viltrumite warrior Nolan smiles, already planning his next great conquest. In a mountain valley, nearly untouched by man, 3 pods crash into the ground, nearly obliterating a nearby forest. The dust kicked up into the air envelops the entire sky, surrounding the whole valley. The occupants remain asleep, their stasis running for longer than had been intended. They remain asleep while a kind older man lugged their pods up the mountain, asleep while he had taken them out of their pods to begin nursing them back to health, even asleep when he had taken the kids out of their arms of the 3 adults, them having woken before their parents. Gine had been the first to wake up, her heart nearly stopping when she realized her child wasn't in her arms, only to relax upon seeing a green-haired boy walk in from the outside carrying firewood. Granola was awake. She would run up to the boy, examining him for injuries, much to his protest, before asking, demanding to know where her son was, where Jarrell's son was. It was then that she looked around her, at the other 2 adults who had been laid out to rest on the bed. Only 2. Was Jarrell not here yet? Was he the one taking care of the kids? She asked Granola, who shook his head, a conflicted look on the boy's face. He hadn't even known the man, but he had saved his mother. He had saved him, and he could at least guess what it meant that he wasn't here, now. Not saying it aloud, he led Gine to the person who was actually taking care of the crying brats. Thankfully, in any case, he couldn't imagine what would have happened if he wasn't there, and Granola had to take care of the brats himself. Granola opens the door to a room where an elderly man rocks both her and Jarrell's boys up and down, the pair of them laughing in his arms. She almost immediately got into a fighting stance before the kind look in the man's eyes disarmed her. He held up her child in one hand, while still holding baby Kalo. Hope you didn't mind. The little ones were yelling something fierce, especially little Goku. The man laughed. Goku? Gine asked, furrowing her brow as she held her boy close to her chest. I didn't know what to call him. The little green-haired boy only told me the name of baby Kalo. I gotta say, if I didn't know you were aliens, those names would hurt my head. He laughed. Gine was stunned, to put it lightly. Not only did this man know they were aliens because Granola told him, though if she was being honest, the tales were a little bit of a dead giveaway, he hadn't cared. He just wanted to make sure they were okay. What kind of planet was it that she had landed on? The choice had worked out even better than she thought. Goku, she repeated. Her son was going to need a name, and the Saiyans were gone. Maybe an Earth name would be a good way of breaking into their new lives. 6 months. Raditz had been bumbling around the darkest pits of space for 6 months, and he was still nowhere close to finding this Earth place. Heck, he'd only now managed to stumble into other sentient life. This place, nowhere, was the best he'd come across in all that time. He was having actual conversations with people again, which was a plus. The biggest minus, though, was that his pod broke down. It was why he landed in this stupid place in the first place. He was stuck, without a credit to his name. The best he could do was resort to stealing if he didn't want to level the place, which would have been a very bad idea, even if it wasn't against his personal morals. A hotspot like this? The Green Lantern Corps would be on his ass in a second. He had almost everything necessary to put his ship back together. Then he would be back on his way, without a clue where his way was. He just needed a new core for his engine, and he knew exactly where to get it. Bardock sighed. 6 months of living on this mudball, and all he'd really done was bum around, helping the old man with farming and training in solitude. The latter was about the only thing that gave him any peace, but what was he even training for? Could he get strong enough to face that Frieza bastard with all the paltry strength available to him? He did more research on the planet when he landed. Earth maybe had 2 people who were strong enough to aid him. One, this Captain America guy, was apparently strong enough to end a war single-handedly, but he died over 50 years ago. The other, a guy named Blue Marvel, was a guy who probably would have been a match for him, according to all the records. He might have been able to make do with him, but he disappeared over 40 years ago. The only other guy who was mentioned to be above regular human strength was this Black Panther guy, a title that had been passed down. Supposedly every Panther had been pretty strong, but he couldn't sense his energy, so he couldn't have been that impressive. Not to mention he wasn't allowed in this Wakanda place that the guy lived in. Fighting his way into that place wouldn't have been that conducive to getting his help. He couldn't even rely on Jor-El's stupid bracelet. He couldn't push the damn thing any farther than it was designed for without making modifications, and Bardock sure as shit wasn't a scientist. He felt pretty useless as a parent, too. Gine and Muesli had been taking care of the kid crap pretty well. Apparently Kal-El and Goku had been getting along pretty well. Even that Granola kid wasn't actively avoiding being around the 2 of them anymore. Goku. His son hadn't even had a Saiyan name. Why would he? It wasn't like there was a Saiyan race around anymore. And there was no sign of his other boy. He'd go off to look for him if he had an ounce of a clue where he was. Tough day? Gine asked, sitting next to him. Of course not. Bardock rubbed his eyes. No days are tough. Not anymore. I beg to differ, Gine smiled, nudging him. Bardock glanced in her direction. At first he didn't notice anything aside from the fact that she was holding his son, then he looked closer. Her earthling attire was stained. Burn marks. Nothing that would actually hurt her, but enough that it was hard to miss. I was exploring. Did you know that this continent is only one on the entire planet? Apparently it's named after a god, some kami guy. She grinned, knowing she grabbed his attention. And it's a continent that's currently fighting itself. A few bandits here and there, nothing to really worry about. Gine indeed walked out that day with her boy, and seen something that on planet Vegeta was pretty rare. On a planet full of warriors, there wasn't much simple joy to be found. But here, people were smiling at each other. Every day for the simplest of things. A nice day, sunshine, seeing the people you love. Sure, those things existed on planet Vegeta too, but they were always accompanied by the threat of death. The thrill that knowing that the next day any of the people you loved could die. Such was the fate of a race of warriors, no matter how noble they might have been, but even their nobility was stripped from under them under the yoke of Frieza. Here, it was like the best parts of her life on Vegeta were able to breathe free from the fear that they could be snatched away from her at any moment. Aside from one place she visited, a small town on the outskirts of a major city. It was being extorted by a group of bandits, heavily armed for this world, sure. Guns, cannons, grenade. But the conflict was barely a skirmish for her. The weapons of this world were nothing special compared to the standard Frieza Force weaponry. Heck, most of the weapons of most worlds that Saiyans had been forced to invade were nothing, but this one was particularly below standard. The most they had been managed to do was scorch her clothes, which was fine with her. She had never been much of a warrior anyway, so she wasn't looking for a big fight. What struck her was the looks of the faces of the people she saved. They were nothing but grateful, kind. They had even made a big meal for her before she left. She leaned her head on Bardock's shoulder as she finished recounting her day. You're going after Frieza, right? She asked. I'm not an idiot. That wasn't what I asked. Gine cut in. Bardock stared at her. Eventually. Yeah, probably. I'm planning on getting strong enough to blow that bastard out of the sky. Yeah, that's what I thought. Well, since when does any Saiyan get stronger alone? Gine asked, Bardock raising his eyebrow. You've always had trading partners, squad mates, a crew, Jor-El? I think maybe we, this family of survivors, could be that crew. Let's explore this place, get stronger together. Bardock sat quietly, his face stoic. It wasn't like he hadn't thought of training with his family before, but the only kid who was old enough to train wasn't even his. and the kid who was his was probably lost in space. Though he had a feeling that Gine wasn't thinking of traditional training, but it wasn't like he had anything else better to do. Fine. It could have gone better. It could have gone a lot better. That's what Raditz thought as he panted, running away from the station's glorified security. He had never been so humiliated, running away from people that he could send into the ground easily. They weren't even lanterns, they were Nova Corps, and not even the bastards with powerful helmets, the most standard tech that he had ever seen. At the very least, he was able to use his real speed to get away from them. That at least wouldn't draw attention from anybody too high up. But there were so many of these morons that he was still running into them every second. At this rate, he was never going to make it back to his ship. He finally stopped when they had somehow managed to corner him, surrounding him in a wall of soldiers. He put his fists up. He wasn't going to give back the equipment, it was the only way to get off this stupid skull. So he'd have to fight, which would have not only ended up with the Lantern Corps noticing him, but if things went especially bad, there was a chance that Frieza might find out that he was alive, which of course meant the Ginyu Force at best, and the Viltrumites at worst. There was no better option here, so he just had to make do. "Hey, you tools!" Raditz glanced up. A boy's voice. He managed to catch a glimpse of him through the crowd, some brat in a red jacket and light sandy brown hair. Around Raditz's age, and he looked enough like him that for a moment he thought the kid could be a Saiyan. The hair color, though, made that impossible. So, maybe a Kryptonian had survived the planet's destruction? The boy lifted what appeared to be some kind of gun from his side. It glowed, blasting what Raditz had expected to be energy beams, but instead it was solid rock. Liquid rock, actually, that solidified the second it was where the boy wanted it to be. The boy flipped and moved around each member of the Nova Corps, blasting the gun with every second that he could. Raditz watched as they were entombed in walls of solid rock. "We only got a couple of minutes before these guys burst out. Might want to get moving." Who the hell are you?" Raditz asked. "You want to ask or you want to go?" the boy asked back. He had a point. Raditz had what he wanted. It made no sense for him to be hanging around here anymore. He nodded to the boy, the pair running to their ships. Getting to the hangar bay, Raditz ran to his pod. It would take time to fix, time that he probably didn't have. He didn't think about that. "You got a problem, dude?" the boy said, glancing at Raditz's ship. "Ah, yeah, that is a problem," he said, as the Nova Corps busted into the ship's docks. "We can take mine. Sound good?" Raditz had no choice but to agree, following after the boy who led him to a much larger ship, much larger than he expected for a boy that young. The boy got beyond the wheel of the cockpit as the ship hummed to life, shooting past the gigantic skull for a moment before it rocked to a halt. "Oof, tractor beam. Gonna have to try harder than that," the boy smirked. Raditz gritted his teeth. This kid seemed confident, but there was every chance that they were gonna get caught. He couldn't keep relying on others. He was saved by his father agreeing to send him off, saved by Vegeta sending him off. The Viltrumites definitely would have killed him by now for being so weak. It was time he did some saving. "I got a plan. Open the airlock door when I say so." The boy glanced at Raditz. He was expecting him to complain, but instead the boy grew a smile. "You got it, Chief," he grinned, giving Raditz a casual salute. "Glad to meet someone who can take initiative." Raditz, confused, went to the airlock. He created an aura around himself, just strong enough to keep the vacuum of space from pulling the air out of his lungs. "Do it!" The bay doors opened. He focused himself on limiting the key in his hands, just small enough that it could be mistaken for a blast from a ship. The small blue sphere condensed in his hands as he narrowed his eyes at the emitter of the tractor beam. "Double Sunday!" His blast obliterated the emitter, the ship lurching forward, blasting off into the stars as the bay doors closed. Raditz went back to the cockpit, to the rapidly celebrating boy who threw him a bottle. "You, my guy, are awesome. Why are you even running from those tools? You could have handled them yourself." Until the lantern showed up. "Fair point. I know I wouldn't want to get caught up in a fight with those D-bags. I'm Peter Quill. But you're gonna know me by the name Star-Lord sooner or later." "That's a terrible name." "Huh?" "Nothing. I'm Raditz." Peter scratched his head. Something about the structure of that name rang a bell for him. Something about a planet that blew up recently, but he couldn't put a finger on it. "Well, Raditz, I'm heading back to my crew. You're welcome to come. They're probably gonna want something from you, though. Fair warning." "Crew? Great, you're a space pirate?" Raditz scoffed. He always hated running into those bastards when he was out on mission. Self-important pricks. "Outlaw," Peter corrected. "And someday the greatest you'll ever know. I've only been going for like 4 years or so, and I think I'm doing pretty good for myself, thanks." 4 years? Raditz asked. The only races he knew that brought people that young into conflict were Saiyans and Viltrumites. Where are you from? Earth, but I was abducted by an asshat who made me join his crew. Not the worst thing in the world, though. Get half the crap I steal. Raditz ignored nearly everything the boy said except for the first part. He was from Earth. This guy knew where his father was, where his family was. He picked Peter up by the jacket, bringing him less than an inch from his own eyeline. Where is it? He asked. You think if I knew that, I'd still be screwing around in space? Yondu probably knows. Well, where is Yondu? Raditz narrowed his eyes. On the ship. He's the leader of the Ravagers. Something I could have just, told you, monkey boy, Peter replied, Raditz dropping him. It appeared he was going to have a conversation with this Yondu if he was going to get where he was going, which meant he and this brat would be sticking together longer than he thought. Vegeta wiped the blood from his mouth, staring up at the mustached bastard who had taken up running his team. Granted, Nappa was still loyal to him, but the others around, not even close. Just a couple of nobodies. Some Viltrumite girl around his age named Anissa, and a Frieza Force nobody by the name of Qui, who he was already starting to hate. Your little team has only managed to conquer one planet this period. You might have cut your dead weight, but you're still nothing compared to the rest of us. Is that so? Gallic Gun! Vegeta launched a blast at full strength, encompassing the Viltrumite in his entirety in a wave of light. Qui scoffed as the Viltrumite girl widened her eyes, not realizing that the Saiyan had been that powerful. But she knew it wouldn't be enough. As the light faded, Nolan was entirely unharmed. His clothing was tired to hell, which he was actually mildly impressed by, and the boy had managed to break skin on his chest, which was especially impressive for a lesser species, but still nothing able to actually hurt him. He kneed Vegeta in the gut, knocking all the wind out of him to the point that he nearly passed out from sheer impact. You, boy, are the Prince of Nothing. The only reason you aren't dying now is because that actually stung, and I need a group that can at the very least do that. He walked away, his back facing the broken boy. So keep up, or die. I don't care which. Vegeta gritted his teeth as Nappa helped him to his feet. This man was complicit in the murder of his race, but he'd have to play along. Get strong enough alongside him to bring Nolan to his knees. As he watched Qui walk behind Nolan, practically kissing the man's feet, he realized he would need allies too. Someone for him and Nappa to push against, to help hide their progress from the Viltrumite so that he wouldn't notice when they got too close. It was a decent effort, but he's way out of your league, Annita said beside him, walking away. He could see some modicum of respect in her voice, as minuscule as it was. The girl would have to do. Hey y'all, thanks for watching part 2 of Earth OCU Dragon Ball. Hope y'all are having a great day, and I look forward to seeing y'all next time.